Hello, everybody. My name is Benjamin Osborne, and today I will be reviewing the case of State versus Michelle Thier. In this case, the plaintiff, Frank Martin Thier, was murdered by his wife, Michelle. Mr. Thier was represented by three attorney generals, including Roy Cooper, John G. Barnwell, and Kathleen U. Baldwin. The defendant in this case was Michelle Thier, who was convicted of first-degree murder by aiding and abetting and of conspiracy to commit murder of her husband, U.S. Air Force Captain Frank Martin Thier. Mrs. Thier was represented by Daniel R. Pollitt. Michelle Thier was found guilty on December 3rd, 2004. Mrs. Thier originally challenged the sufficiency of evidence and had claimed that the court has made an error or a plain error in her trial. The court stated, "Upon our careful review of her appeal, we hold that the defendant received a fair trial that was free of prejudicial error." Mrs. Thier was found to be having an affair with United States Army Sergeant John Diamond. Sergeant Diamond was the man who actually committed the murder via 5 semi-automatic pistol rounds. The murder took place on the night of December 17th, 2000, and Mrs. Thier was indicted on May 21st, 2002. Around the date of indictment, Mrs. Thier had moved to New Orleans to start a new life. Mrs. Thier then moved to Florida, where she assumed a new name, rented an apartment, and had plastic surgery. Files and documents found in Mrs. Thier's Florida apartment indicated that the defendant had a long-range plan to create several false identities and essentially to disappear. The trial court erroneously admitted state evidence about computer documents related to body bags. Mrs. Thier argued that this testimony about the computer documents and emails should have been excluded as bad character evidence, as it made her out to be a moral degenerate and went beyond simply chronicling her extramarital affairs. In November, Sergeant Diamond sent emails to the defendant indicating that he was unhappy about the possibility of their relationship ending and the defendant remaining with her husband. After reviewing 8 boxes of some 21,000 documents and computer records, the trial court found that the marital relationship between the defendant and Frank Thier, the length and depth of the disengagement between the defendant and Frank in their marriage, thus the motive and marital state of the defendant leading up to December 17th, 2000, are relevant for the jury's consideration. As reported by WRAL News, prosecutors claim Michelle Thier left all sorts of evidence on her computer, including a search history on eBay for body bags and incriminating conversations with Diamond and others. Now here's a quote from WRAL News. Thier's lawyers argued the computer files should not be allowed in court because they were seized illegally. The judge ruled in favor of the prosecutors except for a group of files that the judge believed fell under attorney-client privilege and should be left out. At the conclusion of the nearly 3-month trial, the jury returned verdicts of guilty of first-degree murder by aiding and abetting and of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. The trial court sentenced Michelle Thier to life in prison without parole. Michelle Thier was found guilty primarily due to evidence presented during her trial that demonstrated her involvement in the murder of her husband, which took place in 2000. The rationale for the jury's conviction can be summarized in several key points, such as premeditation, involvement of an accomplice, the financial motive, and the evidence. The prosecution argued that Thier had planned the murder in advance. Evidence suggested that she had motives including financial gain from her husband's life insurance policy. This premeditated aspect weighed heavily in establishing her guilt. Michelle was implicated with the involvement of a hitman who testified against her. His testimony provided critical insights to her role in orchestrating the murder, revealing conversations and instructions that indicated her direct involvement in planning the crime. The prosecution highlighted financial incentives that Thier had to kill her husband. The life insurance policy presented a significant payout, which she would benefit from, strengthening the case for her motive. The trial presented various pieces of circumstantial evidence that, when viewed collectively, painted a picture of Thier's involvement. This included inconsistencies in her alibi and behavior following the murder, which raised suspicion about her innocence. In this case, no legal precedent was established. The court's decision hinged on specific factual circumstances unique to this case rather than addressing broader legal principles that could guide similar cases in the future. In this case, the defendant argued that the prosecution improperly used her pretrial silence and exercise of her right to counsel against her, which directly relates to the principles established in Doyle v. Ohio. The legal implications of Doyle v. Ohio is that what you say can be used against you, but that you didn't say anything cannot be used against you. This is known as a Doyle error. In conclusion, Michelle Thier v. State serves as a great example of the complexities involved in homicide cases, especially those entwined with domestic relationships. The conviction of Thier for the murder of her husband raised significant legal and ethical questions regarding the use of circumstantial evidence and the prosecution's approach to establishing intent and premeditation. Despite her claims of innocence, the weight of evidence presented during the trial ultimately led to her conviction. And here are my references. Thank you.